going to stand over here, because I do not want to wave my arms and pointing. Now, my career has always been in, you can all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It's been in jewellery throughout my life. But also, I love fashion, and I love clothes, and I love looking at pictures and finding into certain things, and finding out what things are. So this talk is really just going to take you through certain areas of jewels, where they come from, and now who's got them. So anyway, here we go. This rather tired old thing. This pearl is 93 million years old. So even Tyrannosaurus rex could have beautiful pearl earrings, had they known at the time. So they have been around for many, many, many millennia. And one can only imagine how many extraordinary pearls were in the oceans more than many millions of years ago. But of course, as David said, throughout cultures, the Chinese, the Romans particularly, also the Greeks, loved them. And the Romans used to use pearls enormously. In fact, that was one of the reasons why they came to Britain, because Britain, particularly Scotland, was very famous for its pearls, its freshwater pearls. But this sculpture here, this is actually a sculpture from Palmyra, but you can see she's wearing her double-stone pearl earrings and her pearl necklace. And this is a funerary sculpture. It would have originally been all painted. But these are the sort of things, these are Roman portraits wearing their pearls. And these came from a place called Fayum. It's in Egypt. And so they've been wearing, in fact, Gulf pearls. And so they tended to put them with emeralds, etc., but here they are. And what is so wonderful about these pictures, these are actual portraits. They're not just stylized images of rulers or whatever, they're actually actual people. And so these were being painted during the lifetime of the person, and then when they died, these are sort of, I think about the 2nd century AD, around that time. They were being placed on the face of their mummy in the wrappings to show the woman as she was at her most beautiful, wearing her most wonderful jewels. And these are the sort of things that the Roman jewelry. Now, you see them very much, of course, like this. But when you see these rather tired little things, you must realise that half that pearl disappeared, it's dissolved, and so it was originally much bigger. So when you see these rather, this poor thing, look at it. What a beautiful shape that would have been originally. But with the Egyptian emeralds, etc. So you often saw the two drop pearls with the emeralds. That combination was very popular in Roman jewellery. There we go, another example, the 2 drops. But you can see the opulence of so many of these jewels. Interestingly though, this necklace contains amethysts, emeralds, garnets, etc., large drop pearls, but also fake stones, glass. So this was, in fact, it was a piece of jewellery that was using, well, basically costume jewellery. The person purchasing it would have probably not known it, but surrounding it here are ancient pearls. Now, when you see jewels being used in portraits, etc., I think this is perhaps one of the most famous ones. This is the Empress Theodora, and it's an image taken from Ravenna. And here she is covered in her pearls. Now again, these are enormous. This was a huge, great mosaic. You know that Chanel jewellery, and the designer Fulco di Vadura, Count Vadura. He took a lot of his inspiration. He went to Ravenna with Chanel, and she saw this picture and said, "This is the style of jewellery I want you to make for me and design for me." And so this is where the Chanel style really came from. It's from this particular portrait. She was a ghastly woman, but she had knockout jewels. And she died rather young. She doesn't look, she actually, she's sort of smiling here. But you know what, the quantity of stones and jewels they had was extraordinary. And sadly, of course, all these pieces of jewels, they've disappeared, they've gone. But this gives an indication of the opulence of the Byzantine pieces. This crown, this was created in about the 8th century in southern Germany, so just about 1200 years old. It just gives an idea of what the Byzantine jewels, those jewels in Constantinople looked like, with these colossal emeralds from Egypt, stones from Sri Lanka, spinels from Afghanistan, and of course these enormous pearls here, which in fact would come from Germany. because Germany had deposits, they had the freshwater around the rivers, and the pearls tended to be of a slightly more golden yellow colour. The nacre is not as mirror-like as the Gulf pearls, but you can see the extraordinary opulence of what these things would have looked like. And of course, when fashions change, things change, these pieces were being broken up, and so this is a wonderful rare survival. You see it in art. This is a wonderful painting by Van Eyck, and this has come something called from the Ghent altarpiece. And previous to that, you saw the pictures of the Fayum portraits. The jewelry was quite stylized. Van Eyck was perhaps the first person to truly look at jewelry and paint it as it is, and look at the stones. If you see, sadly you can't really make it out in here, but this staff here, that is in fact, it's actually a staff of rock crystal, and you can see the reflection of the fabric through that staff as well. You've got sapphires, and these pointed things in fact are diamonds. And so, but of course, he looked at jewelry, because when you have a crown like this, it's never solid at the back, it's always hollow. So this was a piece, when Van Eyck was painting this, he had actually looked at the jewels to see how they were made. And also, these luminous globes hanging from there, they look as if they're absolutely moving, truly wonderful. This was painted about 1540, around that time, but the detail is extraordinary. But this is when the fun really begins. For me, the Renaissance was what was the most extraordinary time. The Catholic Church had lost a lot of its power. And so instead of all the money and the jewels going to the shrines of the Catholic Church, it went to basically the rulers, the monarchs, the aristocrats. And they created jewels like this. Verging on the ostentatious, perhaps. But this is something called an agrafe, and it's a shoulder clasp, made for gentlemen. And just give an indication how big it is. It's about this big. It's huge. Wonderful thing. With these very large square-cut diamonds. So this is the time when they can actually then start to understand how to facet the pieces. But again, the combination of these gigantic pearls. Now, when this jewel was made, a lot of the pearls were coming over from Panama, from the fisheries off the Mexican coast, all around that area. The natives, the local communities, they were just things that it was washing up on the beach. They were not considered expensive. And so when the Spanish, and particularly the Portuguese, came over and they saw the quantity of pearls that was available and the people were running around the place wearing them, this was incredible. And so suddenly there was a flood of pearls into the European markets. And they started to decorate everything. This beautiful lady is Anne of Austria. She has a slightly dismissive expression on her face, which I think is lovely. But as you can see, the detailing on her clothes, you've got these clusters of large pearls here. Also, when you look at those brooches, there's a wonderful drop pearl here. When you see red, that, and that, the dark stones are in fact diamonds. And because if I go back, I'm just going to click back, can you see how the stones, you've got the darkness within the stones here? They tended to be set into pitch, which was basically sticky. Glue the stone into a setting and then close the gold around the edge and then cut the gold away. So unless it caught the light very straight on, these stones, when they were portrayed, tended to be dark. And so if you're looking at an portrait and you see dark stones, those tended to be diamonds. But all the detailing across her gown here, all this is this wonderful, wonderful pearl work. And when you've got a large brooch here, which has got the pearl, the diamond, and the ruby, this basically symbolises the eternity, the strength of love and purity. And so you've got the red, the white, the red, the white, and the black, red, white, and white. That is what it symbolises. Now, another lady who had legendary jewels, who in fact you showed a picture of earlier on. This is Elizabeth of France, Elizabeth Valois. She was the daughter of Catherine de Medici. And as you can see, she's almost coated in pearls, but with the gigantic spinels that came from Afghanistan, and all the pearl decoration around here. But also, just want to point out, this is why I love fashion and looking at clothes, etc. These little things are called aglets, something which we don't think about now, and they in fact are the ends of laces, of ribbons, etc. Buttons, hooks and eyes, they didn't exist, so everything was tied on. And so the more aglets you have about your gown, meant the more time it took for you to get dressed, which meant the more time you had to waste. And as you can see, she is covered in it. And so this was a sense of what I can wear and how much time I can take to spend getting dressed. And her aglets were very famous. So when you often see these pictures, you think, these jewels, they can't be real. They absolutely were real. You look at the jewel again, you've got the diamond, the ruby, and the pearl. So which again symbolizes the strength of love and purity. But these details here, pearls here, and these are the ribbon ties, the aglets. And she's covered in them, absolutely covered in them. And beautiful rows and rows and rows of pearls here, very, very large. But again, you think, well, are these details, is this detail real? Does it actually exist? Were these jewels? Well, in a later portrait, there they are again. So when you're seeing these pictures of these monarchs throughout Europe, look at the detail, because you'll suddenly realise what they're wearing are specific jewels, and you can follow them through pictures. And not just that, her gown is embroidered, covered in fine, fine, fine seed pearls. If I just go back here, she was a French princess. This is French, typical French court dress of the 1540s, 1550s, around that time. She married into the Spanish court. She was the second wife of Philip II of Spain. And so when she married in the Spanish court, which was very conservative, she had to wear that. It's almost like a carapace, a covering, complete covering. Everything was sealed off, so she was covered in jewels. This was a way of wearing your wealth. Now, interestingly, she grew up with a lady called Mary Queen of Scots, who I'll be coming to later on. She grew up with Mary Queen of Scots at Fontainebleau in France, and which is perhaps one of the reasons why later on, when I come to Elizabeth I, she, Spain went to war with England, but I'll come to that later on. Another glorious picture, Eleanor of Toledo. She was the wife of Cosimo de' Medici, though I think that peculiar child's very strange. It's got one that it's a bit staring. It's a kind of, it will follow you across the room. But anyway, the gown is magnificent. She had her own a little house of nuns who their sole job was to stitch the embroidery and to do the gold work on her gowns. And as you can see, the gigantic pearls here around her neck. But in fact, more importantly, it's this detail here. This is the first, the huge pearl there, but this is the first time I've actually seen a tassel in European painting. Tassels were very prominent in Indian pictures, etc., but I've never seen one previous to this time. And also, you can't really see it, but it's attached to a belt that will almost certainly be by a gentleman called Cellini. And Cellini was one of the greatest goldsmiths of the 16th century. Because she's advertising Florence. Cellini was in Florence. This is Florentine fabric. And so she's basically saying, this is what my city can produce. So when you see these pictures, this is what they're advertising. And then we have this lady. She looks like rather an overstuffed sofa. You know, she doesn't. But this is Mary de' Medici. Colossal diamonds, colossal pearls. These would have certainly come from that area. She's almost clotted in them. I can totally understand that expression. It's an expression of mine. And what is so wonderful as well, is her gigantic earrings and topped up with huge big pearls and an enormous great diamond there. Somebody said, she's a very ugly woman, but you know what? You'd look straight past that at all the stones. I certainly would. Magnificent, magnificent. And she was known for, there were two diamonds, in fact, that came up. One was called, they were both called the Sancy diamonds. The one was larger, and her husband, irritatingly, bought the smaller one, and she was extremely irritating because she wanted a bigger one. But I think she made up for it with all these pearls, I think. But again, just remember, diamonds at this time were not as expensive as pearls. And so what she's wearing is millions and millions in pearls at that time. Now, the Belle Epoque is from about 1885, 1890 to really 1915, around that time. And I think they wore almost more jewels at that time than we can't imagine it now. But they just looked extraordinary, covered in jewels. And a lot of it was, of course, the American heiresses. They came over from America, and they married into the English royal families, they married into the French royal families, and they didn't have the breeding, but they had the money. And because they had the money, they bought stones, and lots of them. And the necklace, in fact, she's wearing a wonderful crown diadem that came from Boucheron. But in fact, it's that necklace there, that second row, very important row. Oh, just for convenience, that's a diamond belt. You know, practical. This was given to her this was given to her by her husband, whose nickname was Sonny Marlborough. He certainly wasn't Sonny, he was a very bad-tempered man. But this was, just to give an indication, this was a gigantic diamond belt that she wore. But you can see these ropes and ropes and ropes of pearls she's got swagging around here. I did a close-up of that tiara, came from Boucheron. And also, just these large, large, large diamonds. As David was saying, South African mines, all these stones would have come from South Africa. And then a stripe of huge Burmese rubies. So, which again, nowadays, have jumped considerably in price because they realise quite how rare they are now. And also, with the price of pearls going up now, people are starting to realise quite how rare natural pearls are. But this strand of pearls was very famous. It came from Boucheron, and it originally belonged to Empress Eugénie. Here she is wearing it. It's that second row down there. When the French monarchy finally fell in the 1880s, in the 1870s, she fled to England, taking many of her jewels with her. A lot of them were sold, and particularly her pearls were sold. Oh, just to give a little tip, that cross there is cut from one single emerald. So we're talking a stone that's about 3 inches, So huge quantity that she's wearing. But that strand there is around her neck, and this is the strand that was sold and entered into was given to Consuelo Vanderbilt. But also, just a little tip, see the little bits in between there? There's a single diamond cut as discs in between the pearls. Again, practical because it keeps them apart, because they're not as separately. So just put diamonds in between. So if you see an ancient necklace and it's got single little discs of diamonds, they tend to come from Boucheron. But also, this funny thing here, these two stripes. So that in fact is a safety measure. It's sealed with FB, standing for Frederick Boucheron. And what it is when the necklace was strung, two threads ran through it. One, of course, ran all the way through to the clasp, and one ran all the way through like that end, which meant that the necklace could go out on approval, could be looked at the client, and they wouldn't be able to cut that one strand, they wouldn't be able to cut the strand to remove one pearl without breaking that strand, which only was stamped by Frederick Boucheron himself. So this is like an, when you go to the stores and it says you can get your money back if this label's still intact, this is the same thing as that. Just a slightly more glamorous version. Another lady, look, isn't it wonderful? See, when people say, there's a lovely saying, which I absolutely agree with jewelry is only vulgar on other people. If it's yours, it's absolutely fine. And these two women are wearing a gigantic quantity of jewels. This is Mrs. Jay Gould. She was the wife of a gentleman called, obviously, Jay Gould in America. He was an American financier. But look at these pearls here. They're almost like ball bearings. They're absolutely vast. So you can imagine the Dodge necklace, which was around, I think it was around that length in her, how much have been paid for a strand like this? Millions and millions and millions. And this wonderful woman here, this is Queen Margherita of Savoy. Now, she's dressed in mourning. Her husband's just died. She's clearly very unhappy. Her pearls were legendary. And it was also that he was known to be serially unfaithful. And apparently when he felt guilty, he gave her a pearl necklace. I believe that. But you know what? I think her expression says, "Oh no, he's dead." But I think it's almost worth it. But here she is. I just think it's fantastic. So just the quantity of these pearls. Again, they would have come from Bahrain. They would have come from the Gulf. They would have come from Panama. all over the place. Another lady who had legendary pearls. Now, this is like a little more, what's the word, risque than Queen Margarita. This gorgeous creature is a lady called Liane de Pougy. She was a French courtesan, an actress, in Paris in the 1880s, and her jewels were legendary. She was also known as one of the Grandes Horizontales of Paris. She had many clients, patrons, etc., and her jewels were legendary. And as you can see, ropes and ropes and ropes of pearls. Also, when researching this picture, I suddenly realized that brooch there is that, and this thing across the front is in fact that. And these two pieces were some of Lalique's earliest designs. And so she's wearing jewels of the finest quality, right up to date. So she's wearing very modern jewellery at that time. But now, ladies of this period, particularly in France, you've got to realise that they had no property rights at all. If they married, everything they owned became their husbands, straight away. Their clothes, their jewels, their children, everything belonged to their husbands. So these women, if they wanted to have a good life, they had to stay unmarried. They had to stack up many, many jewels, so as time went on, they could then sell them to basically have a pension. And also, if they did get married, they would have to make sure they married somebody more wealthy than they were, because somebody who was less wealthy would basically marry them, take their jewels, take everything, and leave them. And they had no way of getting it back. It was written to French law, the women had no property rights at all. Now, she had a nemesis, another lady in Paris, this lady, Caroline Otero. She was another actress, courtesan, and again was known for her lavish jewels, extraordinary clothes, and her screaming temper. As you can see, now when you see these photographs in the 19th century of these ladies, you've got to realise that all this is real. It's all diamonds. This gigantic collar here is emeralds and diamonds. To get an indication, that stomacher is emeralds, rubies, and sapphires, and it goes from there to there. It's huge. And again, this is by Joan Sandos, this is by Lalique, this is by Lalique, this is by Bouchon, this is Cartier. She's wearing, I would say, almost medals, conquests. And she knew one evening that, I keep popping in and out. One evening, Maxime's restaurant in Paris, she knew that Liane was going to be coming. And she absolutely wanted to outshine her. So she turned up at the restaurant dressed like this. And of course the restaurant went, wow, fabulous, how fantastic. Liane heard about this and thought, oh God, right, I'm going to be outside strong. So Liane then appeared in a very simple black gown, with a single row of pearls around her neck. And then following behind her was her maid with a tray and all her jewels stacked. Because basically, I have so many, I can't wear them. So there was this wonderful competition between these two, but they had opposing boxes for the opera. And performances would be delayed to see who would come on first. Because it was just this, what are they going to be wearing? And so you can see how these jewels, these pearls, etc., were worn and loved and used. This is a piece that, this is a very similar piece to that Caroline had made. But again, look at these huge drop pearls. They've been drop pearls in grey, etc. This is a piece that was made by, he's gone from my head, a very good jeweller. Covered, emeralds, pearls, rubies, an extraordinary thing. It's jewellery as clothing. But when, for me, when I look at this, it is utterly magnificent, but this is what I call a 3 times piece. You wear it once, it's wow, second time, third time is, she's got that on again. It's something that is worn, displayed, and then after everyone's seen it, it's then broken up. And so after a few years, this piece was broken up, the stones were then reused, and then remounted as pieces by Cartier. And so it was all about sort of moving things on and changing, so of course this is why pearls disappear. It's because you see one will never know where these pearls are now, because they've been dispersed and broken up. But again, clothing, jewellery is clothing. these gorgeous things, these are what they call échappés. This is a wonderful one. These are both by Cartier. And how they were worn is they went from the shoulder to, basically up here, to the centre of the gown here. And the really big ones went from the shoulder to the bust to the hip. All in pearls, etc. Now, this was made for Mrs. Vanderbilt by Cartier. Another lady called Eva Stotesbury saw her one and thought, you know what, I want mine, I want another one, but I want it bigger. So I'm going to have mine done in emeralds and diamonds. But then this extraordinary piece by Chaumet this is really how they were worn. It was jewellery as clothing. And you can see there's some ropes and ropes and ropes of pearls, how much that would have been. Now, when you see designs like this, jewellers wouldn't just come up and just paint the designs. It would be something, the client would have gone to them with the stones and say, this is what I've got, what can you do with it? And so the shop would have said, these are the designs that we can produce from those stones, which I think is quite a practical way of wearing your jewellery, really. It's a shoulder sag, it'll keep your shoulders warm, certainly here. This one, look at it, it's vast. It's almost like a diamond and emerald and pearl bra. It's absolutely huge. Not just that, it goes under the arms as well. So, you know, the quantity of stones that were coming out of, particularly India, all the pearls was just, you know, this was Paris in the 1890s, the 1900s. The jewellers must have been having the most wonderful time. But also the movement and all these things. Does this not make you want to wear lots and lots and lots of jewellery? Gorgeous, wonderful. Now, Imperial Russia. When one thinks about the Russian crown jewels, what's left, sadly, is a shadow of what was originally available in the treasury. Here we have Empress Alexandra, Nicholas II's wife, and poor thing, she had that miserable expression. Actually, there's a friend of mine, she's got a gigantic tiara, and she says, oh, it's so uncomfortable to wear. I'm like, oh dear, how awful for you. I think I'd suffer quite happily. But this wonderful piece is by a company called Belle, and they were a Russian jeweler. This necklace is by Fabergé, with huge great pearls and thing. What was available in the Imperial Treasury, the quantity of pearls that were available, was second to none. And this is the piece. And sadly, this is the piece, very much like the Imelda Marcos tiara that we saw earlier on. This piece would have been broken up. Because this was, at that time, when the pieces were broken up, when the revolution, which was 1917, this tiara was perhaps broken up about 1923, 24, because this was modern jewellery. This was only sort of, 30, 40 years old. And so this is why the Fabergé was sold off so quickly, because it was modern. It was only 10, 15 years old at the most. And so this is why they had, as David said, the three categories. The historical pieces, the modern pieces, this would have been a modern piece, and then the pieces that were just broken up for the stones. But the size of that, and also the perfection of that is quite extraordinary. I've not seen, David, have you seen a pearl like that appear in the market?
A Roman?
Yeah. No. It is somewhere. It is somewhere. And the thing is, a lot of people, when they see things like this, they see pearls like this, they don't believe they're natural. They think they're cultured. Some years ago, a lady came in with a very large strand of pearls to get it restrung, and it was just because it had little diamond discs in between that it realised it was a Bouchon piece, and it was probably, £750,000, at least that. And her grandmother had given it. Her grandmother had been given it to her by her mother, and she was wearing it every day because she thought it was paste and not crystal. So a lot of people don't know what they got.
How many grains do you think it is?
Oh, I don't. I have no idea.
I'm just wondering if it's the Roman Perabina, which was in Russia.
Oh,
about 300 grains.
The thing is, have you got the Fersman catalogue at the Christie's? The big Fersman.
Yes.
It has the weight in it.
I'll look later back.
But again, to get an idea of the size of these pieces, when there was a wonderful catalogue that was produced, by the Russians for sale to show what the jewels, what were being put up for auction. And you think, well, that's quite pretty. It's perhaps only about this big, or that's a nice brooch. Nothing too large. It's only when you see them being worn, quite how vast these things are. They're huge. And these would have been pearls that would have been collected. They would certainly come from Catherine the Great. All the monarchs collected pearls, and also the Imperial Treasury. Its business was to purchase stones from dealers to be set into imperial jewels. And so the monarch themselves wouldn't have chosen, it would have been the curator of the Imperial Treasury to say, that's a wonderful stone, this is probably like that for our treasury. But the size of these things is wonderful. Sadly, of course, 1918, it was all dispersed. Now, this piece, as you saw earlier on, this piece was, in fact, a piece by a jeweler called Lemonnier, and gigantic stomacher. And, as David said, it was purchased by the Yusupov family. And here we have, oh God, Zenaida Yusupov wearing the pearl there in her, her little, it's gone almost every day actually, it's rather pretty. But you can imagine just these enormous brooches. That pearl there perhaps is, no, it's not that one. Anyway, when you look at photographs again, have a good look at them, because you can pick up this wonderful detail. Now if I go back again, just think, remember that detail there, not the pearl, that detail there. This is a photograph of the Prince and Princess Yusupov, and she's wearing it's a Regente pearl there, but in fact he's wearing the other part of the stomacher with an emerald set in the top. And these photographs were taken for a costume ball in 1903, held at the Winter Palace, and it was to the fact the Russian court had gone back to its roots really. Rather than echoing the French courts and the German courts of the 18th century, they turned their back on Europe and faced Russia, and they reintroduced a Russian style. And this was a ball that took place in 1903. It was called the Boyar Ball. And they just dressed up in traditional Russian, quote-unquote, peasant costume. I don't imagine many peasants wore stones like this. But when you're going through photographs, you see all these details. This was great big emerald drops, sapphires and pearls, rows and rows and rows of pearls. When they were broken up, sadly, the entire collection was discovered, walled up in the Yusupov Palace. And there is that tiara, and that I think is the Regente pearl with the other one that she was wearing there in the tiara later on. And it's all being broken up. They are separating all the stones. If I go back there, see those drops on the side of her hat? There, these on the side of the colossal emeralds in the centre. Amazing rock crystal endowment tiara that was made for, God, what's her name? One of the Yusupov daughters. Married, Zhenya. Made by Cartier for her wedding. And then later on, another depressing picture. There's the tiara, turned upside down. I mean, these were staggering works of art, And they're squashed into a box. That is the emerald endowment piece. And in there are all the pearls, probably been taken from that tiara we saw earlier on. So this is why these pieces were all dispersed, because the stones were taken out and sold. When you see these pictures, tragic though they are, because of the dispersal, because of the recutting of a lot of these things, we don't see them now, but somewhere out there, these are stones that our people, everyday people, are wearing, because they're now wearing stones that used to be in the Russian crown jewels. Another lady who survived was this lady, Grand Duchess Vladimir, a terrifying German princess. She married Emperor Nicholas's Nicholas's father's brother, and her jewels were legendary. She wore an enormous quantity of them, particularly at the 1903 ball. You'll see her here. A little overdressed, perhaps? But as you see, ropes and ropes and ropes and ropes and ropes of pearls. Even the detailing, even the embroidery on her gown was pearls. So she was covered in pearls. This glorious emerald and diamond necklace is around her head, and exploding out of her peasant headdress is this wonderful tiara by Chaumet. And she looks like a really bad transvestite, but you know what? She looks great. But the jewels are legendary. That wonderful emerald that came from Catherine the Great was 100 carats. That fabulous sapphire there. So you could imagine what she would have looked like when at the ball. She must have looked like a glistening rhinoceros. Another very famous piece that was purchased, this came from Berlin. And this is a piece that in fact is now in the English Royal Collection. Francis Vladimir is wearing it there. And again, wonderful drop necklace, and what dropped pearls out. It was when that Francis Vladimir escaped, her collection was purchased and was then sold off, and Queen Mary of England purchased the tiara. And then you've got our Queen, who now still wears it. And so this is why, one must realize you're just a custodian of jewellery. It goes on and on and on beyond you. And so, as David said, you can break a piece of jewellery up, that's one thing, but sometimes it truly, it's like when people recut stones. You wouldn't recarve a Roman statue, so why on earth would you recut a stone that's come down from the 18th century? Because you're born with a style. No, it's because you don't understand it. Simple as that. Anyway, that's just me being a bit political, because David and I have seen some wonderful things that have been ruined. Anyway, this is, if I come at the end of it, this is why I love pictures, and I love jewellery, and I love following things. And I'm going to take on a bit of a timeline. Now, this gentleman, Pope Clement VII, he was a Medici Pope. His niece, this lady, Catherine de' Medici, married this gentleman, Henry of France. Now, Pope Clement gave her, as a wedding present, some astonishing pearls. Not just 3 rows or 4, but something like 8 rows of pearls. And she then, as a wedding present, gave them to her son's wife, this lady here, Mary Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart. Now, sadly, he died 2 years after they got married. She was sent back to Scotland, well, not even back to Scotland, she'd grown up in the French court. And so sending her back to Scotland was like last time she had been in Scotland was when she was 5 years old. And when she returned to Scotland, must have been profoundly shocking, because she'd gone from this lavish, extraordinary court, nice weather, to Scotland. And sadly, everything went from bad to worse to dreadful. She contracted 2 appalling marriages. First to her first cousin, Lord Darnley, and then when she conspired to have him murdered by this gentleman, Lord Bothwell, she then married him. So her taste in men wasn't perhaps particularly good. Now, the Scottish rebelled against her, forced her out, and she then fled to England. Her half-brother, the Earl of Moray, sold all her jewels. He took all the jewels and sold the majority of them to Elizabeth I, including the Medici pearls, the pearls that she'd been given. Now, Catherine bitterly regretted, she didn't mind Mary going back to Scotland, but she did not want those pearls to go back to Scotland, and tried to claw them back, but Mary hung on to them. And then with Elizabeth, when she purchased them, she wore them all the time, and her gown is stuffed with them. So she wore them relentlessly. And so when you see these portraits, these Tudor portraits, particularly of Elizabeth, and you see all these pearls, this is also a very strong political statement. Now, when Elizabeth, of course, was a Protestant queen, and all of Europe was against her, particularly when Mary Queen of Scots was executed. Now, the connection between, let's say, Mary Queen of Scots and Catherine Medici is that Mary Queen of Scots' daughter, who you saw earlier on, Elizabeth, grew up with her. So basically, when Elizabeth killed Mary Queen of Scots, she was basically killing her sister. And she was then, of course, at that time, married to Philip II of Spain. And so it was another reason to go against this ghastly Protestant queen, who technically, by certainly the European point of view, was not eligible for the throne. But Elizabeth really didn't care. And she wore the pearls all the time. And her portraits show this. And here we have the Medici pearls around her necklace here. Also, Catherine de' Medici gave Mary, Queen of Scots, 24 large drop-shaped pearls. And Elizabeth wore them endlessly in all her portraits. So when you see this fan of pearls around her head, this was a way of showing that what the pearls you got, and also saying, I got the Pope's pearls. I'm a Protestant queen wearing the Pope's pearls, because she really wanted to upset Europe. She financed many of the wars against Spain. This jewel here was purchased from a gentleman called Don Emanuel of Portugal. And here she's wearing it. And this is a slightly later incarnation. And these are gigantic spinels. Again, large pearls with a large pearl drop there. And when this portrait was painted, again, she's saying, I'm wearing the Pope's pearls, and I financed the war against Spain by buying this brooch. And then later on, in the Armada portrait, you see her wearing all of the Medici pearls, and you can count 24 pearls all the way around her head there. And here is the English fleet, and here's the destroyed Spanish fleet, and she's facing into sunshine, turning her back against the darkness of Catholicism. This is what these portraits symbolize. Now, when she died, she had no heirs, and Mary Queen of Scots' son, James, inherited them. Oh, so here we go. A slightly later portrait, again, those are the pearls there. And again, all on her hair, they're the drop pearls. So a very important thing. So when you see portraits of her, they're not glass pearls, they are actual pearls. Now, James inherited all her jewels. He'd grown up in somewhat straitened conditions in Scotland, and when he came down to England and opened her coffers, he went crazy. He reset many of the pieces. That was the jewel that you saw earlier on, that had been reset. And he wore it regularly as a hat jewel. And he gave the Medici pearls to his wife, Anne of Denmark. And here she is wearing all the pearls around her neck there. And also these two drop pearls there. Now, her daughter, Elizabeth of Bohemia, on her wedding, she was given all the pearls as well. So there we are, there are the Medici pearls there, and all the drop pearls that came from Elizabeth and of course Mary Queen of Scots. Later on, these are the pearls again. So do you see how when you see the portraits, how it all follows through? And then later on, her daughter, Sophia. Now, I was not able to find a photograph of Sophia wearing the pearls, but do you remember the two drop pearls? That's a lot fuzzy there, but that pearl there and that pearl there. It is, oops, one there. So again, these were very specific pearls. Everybody knew what they were. Her son, this gentleman, was George I of England, and his wife is wearing the Medici pearls across there. Later on, George II, his wife, Caroline of Ansbach, is wearing the pearls there and sprouting from her shoulders. And then George III, here, his wife, Charlotte. These are the Medici pearls, again, sprouting up the top there. So you can see what these things are, as you can see the progression. Now, George IV, he got married, had a disastrous marriage, produced a daughter, and his wife never wore the pearls, so we don't have a picture of her wearing them because they lived with each other. Now, because his daughter had died, the throne was then inherited by his brother. And this is William here, and his wife Adelaide. The pearls by this time were getting a little bit tired, understandably. So what she did, she took out the best pearls and had a single row made there. Now, when he died, he hadn't produced an heir there. There was no direct line. And in German Salic law, none of the jewels, none of anything can be inherited by the female. And so when Victoria inherited the throne, she had to send everything back. That included furniture, pictures, jewels, the lot, and it caused a major, major problem. The Hanover pearls, the Medici Hanover pearls, went back, but Victoria clung onto the big row, which is that row there. She tuned it with the second row that came from Queen Anne, and she would not give this row up. And then later on, when she died, it was then willed to the state, and it then became a state treasure, so it could not ever go back to Germany. It was going to remain in England. When she died, Queen Alexandra inherited all the jewels. Here she is. I think she's just popping up for a little shopping trip, just something understated. Ropes and ropes and ropes of pearls here. You've got the Kohinoor diamond here, and oops, hang on, what's the pearl? Oh, wait. I pressed the wrong button. Hang on. Okay, there we go. And it's that row there. That's the Hanover row there. And also some gorgeous. I mean, she looks fabulous. And then later on, Queen Mary. That is the row of pearls there. So again, you can just see that this is why pictures and inheritance is so important to people. And then the Queen wore them on her wedding day for the two rows together. So you've got this single row on the inside that belonged to Queen Anne, and then the Hanover Medici pearls there. And she still wears them to this day. And whenever you see the Queen wearing this, the double row necklace, that means it's a very, very important occasion. Because these two strands, particularly obviously the bottom one, are the strand that she considers the most important piece of jewellery item in the crown jewels, beyond the diamonds, beyond everything, because it's historically the most ancient. This was taken in 2013, I think it was. And I just love the idea of she's wearing a strand of pearls that was worn by Catherine de' Medici, Mary Queen of Scots, Elizabeth I. You can see this continuation right the way through. So this is a good example. Wear pearls, love them, use them, wash them. Keep them clean, they will last for decades and hundreds of years. So this is why I love jewellery and this is why I love portraits, because it's not about value, it's the continuity and it's the beauty of them. And also, you can put lots and lots of stuff on. Anyway, so the end. Did that all make sense? Is there any questions at all?
What happened to all the pearls that were in the dresses?
Again, with stitching and unstitching, cracked, broken. Pearls are quite, they're strong, but they can be quite fragile things. Also, they just, when fashions change, costumes get changed, they just disappear, and it's almost impossible, as David knows, unless the pearl has maintained its original shape, to find things. A drop pearl that's had a good blemish on it. They'll think, why did you remove that? You remove it, you've just removed the identification of it. And so all the detail, all the other bits and pieces you see on the gowns, they tended not to be glass pearls, they tend to be real, but again, they've just been dispersed and handed off to courtiers. Elizabeth I wore her gowns once, and gave them away. So I know. So it was. They were living at a level of wealth we just don't understand about. But when people say, "Oh, it's dreadful, she wears too much jewellery," no, go back a few years. They wore a lot.
And in the crown jewels of Crown London,
Yeah.
there are not really any pearls of any significance at all.
No.
The Imperial State crown has got a few little pearls.
Yeah.
Now look like teeth or
Yeah.
So where have all of these extraordinary pearls gone that were once upon a time belonging to the kings of England?
Oh, they went back to Germany. Back to Hanover.
Does the Queen have any in her vault?
Yes, masses and masses. I mean, Queen Mary loved her jewels. Queen Mary also inherited, Queen Alexandra inherited lots of jewels. She was a Danish princess, and her sister was the Tsarina of Russia, and so a lot of the jewels came over back after the revolution. Her sister came over with her everyday jewels, which were trunks. She had a lot of stuff. And so Queen Mary inherited a lot of pieces as well, and Queen Mary purchased a lot of stuff. And so they don't have that provenance, that continuity going back. The oldest pearls is that strand there, and those 4 drop pearls. They're called Elizabeth's earrings, the ones in the Imperial State Crown, but more likely they not from Elizabeth I. They came from Elizabeth of Bohemia, who was James I's daughter. It's so confusing all these different things. But it's the same. We're so enamored now by diamonds that when you see pearls, you think, oh, that's pretty. Diamonds were incredibly rare, so we just didn't have them. And so diamonds are far more captivating because they sparkle. But pearls they're living things. Diamonds are lovely, but there is an inanimate. Unless it's the hope that. Any more?
Andrew, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been great fun.